Thank you, Kaino, for that update. It's in regard to the president's address from State House yesterday in Nairobi, where he talked about hinted at a possible constitutional change. So let's look at the coverage of the papers. Here's the front page of the Daily Nation. Why Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, wants to change the constitution. And there is a picture of him and the Deputy President, William Ruto, yesterday at State House in Nairobi County. So the next is the coverage of the People's Daily. It's time to review the constitution, according to President Uhuru Kenyatta, who yesterday hinted at that in regards to what he said was the correction of what we got wrong in the 2010 constitution promulgated on the 27th of August 2010. Next is the coverage of the Star newspaper. And Uhuru Kenyatta says, the president, we must end poll violence. And the concern here will be, and the point of attention rather, will be on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, and how to restructure that commission if Kenya is set to attain political normalcy in the country. I'm joined by Benji Ndolo on my media trying to see a political commentator. Benji, good morning. Good morning. I appreciate your time. Yes. Happy Madaraka Day. Happy belated Madaraka Day. And Brian Omondi is a political party member of the Third Way Alliance Party. Good morning, Brian. I appreciate your time. Good morning. Wakili and lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Law, Kennedy Echesa, is getting mic'd up. He'll be joining us shortly to talk about these issues at hand. If I may come to you, Brian, first. 10 years since we promulgated the 2010 Constitution, the president critically touched on the sessional paper 10 of 1965 yesterday during his speech, and we seem to have not attained political equality, social justice, human dignity, freedom of want, equal opportunities, and high and growing per capita income. Can Kenya's today unequal nature or unequal society in the contemporary Kenyan setup be attributed to the failure in attainance of what was contained in the sessional paper 10 of 1965?
Thank you very much, Ayub, for inviting me again to come and reflect on some of these difficult questions. I think to respond to your question, I would want to reiterate that the president, for the very first time in my opinion, made a very wonderful speech yesterday. I have observed and reviewed all the speeches that the president has made for the last 7 years that he has been in power, but his yesterday's Madaraka speech, in my opinion, was one of the very best, because that speech was factual, that speech was historical, that speech was philosophical in a way that it was able to communicate to both the scholars and even the pedestrians. And now to respond to your question. I think the president was very clear yesterday in his assertion that Kenya as a country is a work in progress. And therefore he said that he is not there to provide solutions to the country by himself, but is there to be one of the people who are helping in developing and driving this agenda called the Project Kenya. And so to be able to say that the equality substance in the country can be measured by not performing specific functions by the state, I think is being unfair, because we as Kenyans and as a people, as you were reminded yesterday, we are supposed to be part and parcel of this process of building one Kenya, one nation, the Project Kenya, as was put forward by the president yesterday. So it is a collective responsibility. Okay, yes. We'll
come to the need for a constitutional change, the president said is very much of importance at this time and will be implemented before his tenure expires in 2022. Benji, then the concern was that even after the adoption of 65 paper, that was the president's mentioning of sessional paper 10. The concern was that the ruling elite, which took over power after the colonialists left and Kenya became independent state, did away with the Majimbo constitution, which was very progressive, forcing political proponents of the Majimbo to dissolve and create centralist government that was no different from that of the colonial era. So our problems were man-made, were Kenyan-made, and we are trying to solve a problem that we made in 1963. How do we get out?
We get out simply by changing the kind of politics that we practice. The team that is there now are basically children of what has been called the black colonialists, because Raila, Uhuru, children of Jaramogi, Jomo, etc., have not really taken a path that is stridently different from the problems that we had at independence If anything, things have become, in a sense, worse politically. Why? Because the first thing that we're doing is, the president complained yesterday about the need to change the constitution because of violence in the multi-party era. Well, we're just harvesting the fruit of the seeds that we've sown, the seeds of tribal and ethnic mobilization as a function of politics. So that now, every time you have a victor and a loser, the perception is a tribe has won against another tribe, and therefore there needs to be some sort of conflict. So once again, the solution is not to change the constitution. The solution lies in faithful implementation of the Constitution 2010, and that really hasn't happened. If you look at the handling of constitutional commissions, independent offices like the Auditor General, commissions such as the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission,
the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties,
which has had an acting director for 10 years. And it's a wonder that political parties such as Third Way kind of just watch all these things. They themselves are a political party, partaking in this madness and purporting to also provide an alternative voice. In a sense, the government today has collapsed the opposition. We don't have a credible opposition in the House of Parliament. What you have now is some sort of communist, almost, setup, and that is regrettable, unfortunate, and retrogressive, because it's not acceptable. An opposition party has no business, getting co-opted into government.
So you're talking about the handshake that brought together the president and the ODM
Not just the handshake, but just in general, you cannot have almost a sense where opposition MPs are attending parliamentary group meetings in State House and all this stuff, or informing what's happening in a ruling party and what have you. I do understand the importance of peace of mind for the president and a semblance of unity, but we must also make a decision. Do we want to entrench and enhance democracy, or do we want to, in essence, revert to a single party state?
All right, and that's where he
and
mentioned...
that's the pathway
that's where he mentioned on the democratic credentials of the country that was heightened following the attainment of the 2010 Constitution.
And finally, I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way, but any child can just see that the Honorable Raila Odinga, since the handshake, cannot speak.
Okay, we'll come
and
to
that's a choice he's had to make.
We'll come to that aspect, because one of the proposals in the BBI is it advocates for the position of the official opposition leader who comes second in the presidential election, and we'll be unpacking why we need a constitutional change as hinted at by President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday. The number is 0791 478 the hashtag on Twitter, New Day KE. The short SMS code is 40920. After the break, we'll be back with the discussion, and Kennedy Echesa will be joining us here on the broadcast. Stay tuned. Good morning, welcome back to the broadcast. You are watching New Day Kenya, discussing matters that pertain the 57th Madaraka Day celebrations that President Uhuru Kenyatta led the country from State House in Nairobi County, albeit the restriction measures put in place by the government to contain the pandemic, and the first of its kind. He mentioned very critical papers in regard to Sessional Paper 10 of 1965, the entrenchment of the Kenyan democracy under the 2010 Constitution, but he wants a change of the supreme document. What he says will be an expansive nature to accommodate all Kenyans to create a cohesive country. Wakili Kennedy Echesa, lecturer of law at the University of Nairobi, joins us alongside Benji and Brian Omondi, and I appreciate your time, gentlemen, for making time here on the broadcast. First of all, in regards to the changes, Wakili, we discussed that with Benji before we went on break, and Brian, let me just quote Article 43 of the Constitution. It says that every person has the right to the highest attainment of standards of health, which includes right to healthcare services, including productive healthcare, accessible and affordable, that is housing and reasonable standards of sanitation, free from hunger, adequate food and acceptable quality, to clean, freedom to right to clean and safer water in adequate quantities, social security, education, and shall not be denied access to emergency medical treatment. The state shall provide appropriate social security to persons who are unable to support themselves and their dependents. all these rights appear to be not effected under the 2010 Constitution. Why do we need a change to the Constitution and instead of shepherding what we already have to fully implement the 2010 document?
I think, Ayub, any response from a person living in Kenya then will be that these are socio-economic rights that ought to be realized progressively. But I agree with you that the progress has been slow. It is almost 10 years down the line, and we are yet to fully implement the socio-economic rights. And in the Mitubel case, we have a case called the Mitubel case, where the court had the occasion to consider what then will inform the term progressive rights. The court observed that the progression nature of these rights should not be mistaken to the extent that the government makes no effort to full realization of the rights that you've just read. However, I am convinced that the president and the people who are now designing the so-called constitutional moment are not interested in some sections of this constitution per se, including the Bill of Rights. The president is keen, if you are very attentive to his speech yesterday, to change the constitution in relation to the structure of governance and expand the executive to address what he terms as cycles of violence after every election and lack of inclusivity within government.
There are three or two key institutions which are very, very pertinent and the nerve center of the political establishment in the country. The Office of the Registrar of Political Parties is still held in acting capacity since formation. The IEBC appears to be heading in the wayward direction at the center point of accusations in handling or being the ample umpire in the process of the elections in the country. And then you have the political establishment itself. Therefore, the president hinted at an expansion of the executive. How will this perhaps end then the political violence or the cycle of violence in the country when we had the Grand Coalition government, which was very expansive and failed to tame political appetite of the political leadership in the country?
That is the big question, because as you've said, some of these institutions remain political. The Register of Political Parties as an institution is a political institution. I do not expect a high degree of objectivity from that particular office. IEBC, for sure, I can tell you that it will go. And the architects of these constitutional reforms will bring in an IEBC that is favoring their position. And that has been the main problem with our country. We are changing the constitution with certain people in mind so that they get these positions we are going to create. It entirely, or so to speak, it may not sound an objective way of reforming the law. When you are reforming the law and you already have positions in mind with presumptive occupants, once those occupants leave, occupants that will come will still abuse the very positions. The problem in Kenya has never been inclusivity. President Moi was a president, Kenyatta was a president, Kibaki was a president. But Kenyans, during President Kibaki's period, Kenyans had a sense of some inclusivity. And every part of this country felt to be part of government is just about our national character. If we can use the available constitution to reform our national character, reform our institutions, let them be functional, then I don't think we'll require that moment of constitutional change.
Okay, of course we have constitutional officers, but there appears to be the problem who are the drivers of these institutions. Brian, if I may come to you then, is this perhaps when you listened to, when you yesterday and of course heard from the president in regard to a hint in changing the constitution, more or less, is it, are we heading into a direction or are we heading into a horizon where this is all about the creation of extra posts for individuals who are planned for recycling and to be staying within the government in regards to the expansion of the executive? Or is it for the betterment of the common man and whether we have attained what Article 43 of the Constitution enshrines?
Well, I hold a different view. Let me take you back the history lane. The founders of this nation envisaged a system whereby Kenya was started as an administrative country. And so it was anchored on administrative grounds. And it has taken us all this long to change from an administrative nation to a political nation. The effects that we are trying to address right now are as a result of the fact that as a nation for all these years since independence, we have always been administrative. If the nation was anchored in a political foundation, then the things you're talking about, inclusivity, the things you're talking about, bringing different new structures in government.
The 9-point agenda of the BBI.
Yes. So I think the direction they are headed to is a good direction, because we have suffered as a nation since independence, because it is a few people that have always taken over the administration leadership of the nation. But right now, what the president and the prime minister are trying to do is to try to bring together every political leader, every Kenyan's voice, so that they can be able to push an agenda that is political. And if you look at the first world countries, if you look at the foundation of their political systems and economic system, it is political in nature. And you see a lot of cohesion and also people moving towards the same direction most of the time. So I think what they're trying to address here is the structure that was put down at independence, which has failed to work up to now. And they're trying to do that through expanding the governance structure and the administrative function, so that they can be able to include as many people as possible and move together in tandem as a nation.
Okay, now Brian,
I have a right of reply.
Yes, go ahead,
before my brother's good word saying. But Brian, at one time in this country, after the post-election violence, we had a cabinet of over 54 members of cabinet. We had about 113 assistant ministers. We had a prime minister. We had 2 deputy prime ministers. We had a president and we had a vice president. These did not solve the problem at all. Every member of parliament at that time was having a GK. Every community was represented, but that never changed anything. So even if all of us were to be prime ministers in this country, unless we change our national character, I do not foresee any future.
Yes, and that brings me to the question about, Brian, I wanted to get a follow-up. You extraordinarily sounded sanguine and very hopeful. But the point is the character of these political players, the extent to which they are recycling, the camouflage nature of the Kenyan political players. I mean, there are some who are looking at this from the skeptic perspective that beyond 2022, they are likely going to be coming up with a narrative, another handshake form of political groupings, and then in 2027, then we'll be having an outfit to pull Kenya from the political violence and free it from the shackles of political uncertainty. How trustable are these elements within the political establishment?
I think, in my considered view, I believe that the conversation that is going on right now is a conversation that is very open. I don't know whether my brother Wakili has presented his views in the BBI initiative, for example, and eloquently and passionately talks about what he feels the country has failed and the way the country is failing again in charting its way forward. So in my view, this is what I believe. The best way of moving forward is to try to bring people together. As to whether this is being done by people who are selfish and people who have a different agenda, that is something that we can debate about. But I think what is important, and what all of us will agree, is that when we move together and we make decisions together as to how this nation is supposed to proceed, that is the best direction. About honesty, that one is something that we can debate about. But again, if we have a problem with our politicians and the way the decisions they are making, I think it is imperative of me and you, and my brother Wakili also, to venture into this political world and try change some of these things that we feel are not being addressed properly. So it is a collective responsibility of Kenyans to be able to participate in charting the way forward for the nation.
Okay, but Benji, I mean, all this is happening at a time when the president is, as he told a reporter at State House in Nairobi County, about how he wants a team that will help him deliver on the pledges he made in 2016. But the point is, even as he is creating a level political feeling coming in the bringing together of Odinga and the like-minded sort of political players to the political ring going forward to 2022, there's a deficiency in trust from the public. How does he then perhaps amend that and get the public alongside him, despite the determined voice that he's expressing at the moment of wanting to unite this country going to 2022?
Thanks, Ayub. The way to get citizens on his side, the way to improve and up his credibility, is simply by implementing this constitution. And I just want to go a step back to a question you had asked Wakili Echesa about how come Article 43 is very clear in black and white. I'm reading it here. Every person has a right to the highest attainable standard of health, including healthcare service, reproductive healthcare, to be free from hunger, etc. Yes, that is an aspirational right. You may be aware that a homeless man was shot dead by police last night in Mathare. That is who you call Wanjiku. That is who this article seeks to protect. And so in the constitutional amendment debate, my advice would be that once we have achieved these aspirations in the Constitution, as a minimum, as a basic, that once we had achieved these, because the president did an interview last week where he was asked, Your Excellency, how would you like to be remembered? And he had several answers, and I looked at the social media and some of the reactions to those answers. The legacy, reputation, identity of a president is very important because it goes hand in hand with the history of a country. And so, as a second-term president, he's eager to cement his legacy. And he's eager to do this on the backdrop of continued criticism and prediction that if something drastic doesn't happen, Ayub, he will be the worst president in the history of the country. And so, to answer your question, clean and safe water in adequate quantities, social security, education as a right, as Article 43, I would have just gone to implement this constitution to the letter as the first president under this constitution. All issues notwithstanding. After implementing these ideals, we can then look at amendments, but not rushing to amend that which have not even implemented in the first place. Let me leave it there for now. But I just want to also agree with Brian when he says that part of change is not just criticizing or critiquing the system, it's also looking at what is on offer and then somehow offering yourself to be the change that you want to see. So I most definitely agree with that. Difficult as it is.
All right. Now,
yeah, because if it's a country of money, looting, corruption, tribal, demagoguery, so how do you even compete?
If you don't worship so and so, you can't be elected.
Exactly. Again, if you don't go and kneel in front of Baba, even if you're a young, brilliant lawyer,
you can't be elected.
But then again, the electorate is a problem with this. So, but I agree with him that you have to.
That's where the hope lies then.
Yes, you have to get involved.
A complete paradigm shift in the end will be key.
Yes.
Gentlemen, let's take a look at another highlight. And this is a breaking news from State House in Nairobi County, where the leader of the majority party in the National Assembly has survived the plucking out of Ruto allies from plum positions at the bicameral parliament. However, his counterpart from Mumias East, Benjamin Washali, will be replaced by Emmanuel Wangwe, who is the member of parliament for Navaholo, while Igembe North Member of Parliament Maoka Maure will be replacing nominated Member of Parliament Cicely Mbarire. Now, we have no conclusive report, and a substantial one for that matter, on the chair of the National Assembly Budget Committee and Kikuyu Town Member of Parliament Kimani Shungwa. But these are the changes that have been effected this morning in a meeting that started at 9 a.m. and the survival of the Garissa Township Member of Parliament.
You can be sure this was what they were discussing last night in the footage that has leaked all over of the president and Honorable Raila. No, and Honorable Raila.
Right,
yes. I think it's from around midnight or 11 p.m. There's some footage there from all the cameras around town that captured them in unidentified vehicles, a pro box to be exact, walking in town having a discussion. You can be sure this was a forewarning that this is not going to happen. And I don't want to say too much, but Kenyans are really going through a lot. There is too much political drama, and sometimes I feel it's unfortunate. Because, I mean, this is like a soap opera. This is like a soap opera.
Okay, Brian, when you look at the changes from the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen, Senator Susan Keika out. Now you have Benjamin Washali, the leader of the majority whip, out. Cicely Mbarire nominated, out. And are we looking at Article 255 of the Constitution here in regard to what the President hinted at yesterday in terms of amending some of the constitutional clauses through parliamentary initiative?
I think the President is doing what he ought to have done many years ago, because he has now taken leadership of the party, and as a president, it is expected of him to put his vision first and try to mobilize people who can be able to support his agenda and his vision as the president of the country. So anybody that cannot be able to work in tandem with his vision, I think should not be close to him. And he has taken too long to do this. So I don't want to meddle into Jubilee affairs issues, but I believe what the president is doing, he ought to have done it a long time ago. And this was expected, and I know many of the sort are going to happen, are going to follow this moving forward.
But
So it is okay. It is within his rights. He's a party leader of Jubilee Party, and he's supposed to actually ensure that he works with the people who support his vision, because his vision comes first.
Okay, Wakili, are we looking at Article 255 of the Constitution, more or less a chunk of this, large portion of this happening through the parliamentary initiative in placing strategic players at strategic positions?
It is true. And first, may I take this opportunity to congratulate the Honorable Emmanuel Wangwe MP Navaholo for his appointment as the government chief whip. I have no doubt that Emmanuel Wangwe is up to the task, and he will drive the Jubilee agenda, a national agenda, in the National Assembly. I say so because I am lucky. I come from the boundary of Mumias East and Navaholo, so I report to both members of parliament. So Uhuru was picked from one and given to
dropped
my
one
brother.
and then
Dropped one and handed over to my brother Wangwe. And I agree with Brian that this party belongs to Uhuru Kenyatta and no one else. Is the party leader. He can do as he wishes. He can nominate his own relatives and appoint him to plum positions. You serve at the presidential pleasure, what we call executive pleasure. And I agree with you that this is a wider scheme or strategy to amend some of the provisions through the parliamentary initiative, so that what is taken to the referendum is that which is forbidden by law to be amended on the floor of the House. And the President and the Right Honorable Prime Minister want to take effective control of both houses so that they don't meet any hitch when they bring these changes on the floor. The Prime Minister demoted the Kiminini MP, Chris Wamalwa, who is a Ford Kenya MP, and you see Chris is a Ruto ally, and Uhuru has followed suit. I am happy for Duale. Duale has a right to have his political inclination and support the deputy president, but Duale has been doing so respectfully. Duale has not been forceful in confronting the president in terms of his political persuasion with the Prime Minister Raila Odinga. So they have achieved to this end. They're going to whip both houses in supporting changes through parliamentary initiative and only taking those changes that do not meet the threshold of being changed the floor to the people of Kenya in a referendum.
Yes, Benji.
Duale is an interesting character. Duale is a man that was fished from a high school in Garissa by the Honorable Raila Odinga around 2005, almost 15 years ago. I'm told he's made a lot of money. Money is important in politics.
Very true.
It is only in the political spectrum of this country that you can be a bicycle riding Kenya one day, and in a few short years you can own aeroplanes and helicopters. It is only so. Again, this is in the larger context of what is really wrong with our politics. I think Duale has been very tactical. Again, as I said, he came from ODM with the deputy president. Duale has been very forceful, very crass in advancing the Jubilee agenda, especially in the president's first term. So I think in a sense, when it came to the give and take, the quid pro quo, what has come out is that being a minority, minority tribe politician, and given the aggression with which he has run the Jubilee agenda in the House, I think then he's been a lightning rod, but he also in the negotiations became a can't touch this kind of person.
Okay.
So that, of course, he's seen to be very loyal to the deputy president, and his leaving him also now continues to increase the mystery around what is really the deal in Jubilee, and is there a true and complete and total fallout between the president and the deputy, and some think that there isn't.
Does his survival means then that might be then there is some level of bromance that is left in the bucket
correct
for the duo?
And that also he will be one of the key stakeholders in ensuring the deputy president's stake at the succession game. And once again, this is very complex, and just to go a step back to my earlier comments, when you see the president having to do offline meetings at night, you know that things are cooking. Big things are cooking.
Okay.
And also remember, Ayub, we're in the era of social media where a lot of the social discussions also inform the perceptions and therefore inform policy formulation. Watu wanasema nini? Watu wanafikiria nini? And so, just to be a little philosophical about it, I just feel a little sad because this country for the last decade has in essence, Ayub, been in a dilemma. It's a dilemma because you have, do you remember NASA talking about cessation?
Yes, that was the maps that went round. And the drafting of that motion.
And cruel marriage, etc. I didn't agree with it.
Member of Parliament, Peter Kaloma.
Yes, I didn't agree with it, but I can just see what the dilemma is because this country is in a very warped situation where you've got people with large followings who are not in essence in the state. If they were magnanimous enough, having read all the signs on the wall, they could have in essence donated that support to someone or something that then unifies the country. So it's, I don't want to go beyond there,
okay.
But I do wonder where we're headed because even with this level of political machination, how is President Uhuru going to really get down to work?
We'll come to that.
If you have to keep looking over your shoulder and making, you know, and making extremely complex political calculus all the time, every single day.
Okay.
I think they've denied him, and this is what you were talking about yesterday, the comfort and authority to just settle in the seat and to execute his agenda without overthinking the position.
And that's not only from the sort of the exogenous pressure that came between 2013 and 17, but equally from his own parties inside, the intra-war in the ruling Jubilee party. However, though...
Because remember...
you talked about an offline meeting...
Because remember, his deputy is also not happy
okay.
and not content with him allowing an outsider into the ruling
Neither
party.
is now the ODM party happy or Raila Odinga happy with the president and the DP William Ruto coming together and address issues.
Yet they must.
Yesterday's, of course...
Yet they must.
Yesterday's off-the-mic conversation between the president and his deputy.
I knew it was being watched very clearly.
More or less, of course, was watched from different perspectives and with bated breath in regard to who wants what and when.
Yes.
But in regards to the video I've mentioned about the offline meeting between the president and did you say the ODM leader?
Yes.
That is subject to confirmation.
I've seen the footage.
Okay, we haven't gotten communication.
You know, I'm a senior analyst.
From the
I can confirm to you.
What is law?
Okay,
I wouldn't say law, but I've been around a while. Ayub knows that.
Yes.
And I can tell you that those are the gentlemen.
Of course, we get briefings from State House.
There's a lot of security detail.
Strategic Communications Unit, that is PSCU. And Brian then...
But PSU give you what they want you to know.
And that's what we question in regard to, that's what we are analyzing in deeper sense, the president's speech in regards to what he mentioned. Brian,
yes.
The head of state yesterday, before we come to the Mulembe nation politics, did mention other issues in regard to the poverty index in the country, ignorance disease that dotted the country in 1963 when we gained independence from the British. Still, they seem to be dotting and a part and parcel of the problems in contemporary Kenya. How do we get out of that?
Well, that is a very complex issue, and I'm happy that the president acknowledged that he doesn't have the solutions to the issues that have been bedeviling us since the independence. And therefore, he said that he wants us to join him to be able to address this project called Project Kenya. But to come back to your issue, I think Article 43 again is very clear that Kenyans have the right to healthcare, proper healthcare system, etc. But in this circumstance, I think as a nation, we have not been able to address or show a lot of efforts in addressing these issues that have been bedeviling the nation since independence. And one thing I am happy of is that the leadership has acknowledged that this is a challenge, and therefore it is an opportunity for us to be able to see the opportunity in this challenge and be able to speak loudly so that this can be heard and can be addressed moving forward. So in his speech yesterday, he acknowledged that, which is very good. And I think we just need to join hands and continue pushing the government and, of course, through the various departments within state to be able to ensure that this matter that is very critical and at the core of every mwananchi to be addressed effectively.
Okay. Now, Wakili Echesa, let's finish up on this with you then. In regards to what I've mentioned, poverty, ignorance, disease, universal healthcare coverage, affordable healthcare for Kenyans, the dignity of the people, the level of the last mile connectivity in terms of Kenyans who have access to electricity, land, and other important issues as of course contained in the TJRC report, which is still gathering dust in Parliament. Is it because of the unbridled political policy of rewarding cronyism that has led to these problems still predate post-independent Kenya, and why we are unable to solve them in terms of equal resources and shared between members of this country and the citizens in regards to the equal opportunities and the level playing field ought to have been created?
I think I must mention that taking a scholarly approach to the president's speech yesterday, the president made mention of sessional paper number 10 of 1965 in a very good way, that ordinary Kenyan may think that that was the paper that would have saved this country. That paper had good intentions, but the interpretation of that paper by successive regimes, including its revision in 1986 by the Moi regime, is the source of all problems in terms of inequality of this country. That paper, it was interpreted in a certain way to lock out some regions in this country out of the main development framework. And some regions were to be categorized as highly productive areas.
Especially the agricultural land.
Yes, and some regions were to be categorized as lowly productive areas. You cannot explain why you will take maize all the way from Kitale, Trans Nzoia County, where maize farming is predominant, to come and process the same maize in Thika. You cannot explain why it has taken years to have tarmac reach Garissa, Isiolo, and other northern frontiers. So the president would have started by allowing us to reimagine the intention of the sessional paper number 10 of 1965 and how this paper negatively affected the equal distribution of resources in this country. Politics too has played a role in undeveloping Kenya and making Kenya captive of the political elites. In this country, as my senior brother said, we are beholden to politics. And we are beholden to personalities, not even ideologies. So that I may be a lawyer, I may be a teacher of law, but I have to put aside my legal intelligence to go and bow either before Musalia Mudavadi, Francis Atwoli, or Raila Odinga if I have to become senator for Kakamega, for instance.
Okay.
He has to go and bow before Uhuru Kenyatta or Kiunjuri or any other.
Or Kalonzo.
Or Kalonzo, if he wants to become a leader. Personalization. Yeah. But if we revolve our politics around ideology, and we shall not fear, whether Ayub becomes the president, Ayub will be subject to our ideological programming as a country and subject to the constitution. This is a very good document that if you implement it word for word, even if it takes you 30 years, you do not need to change even the color of this cover.
Ayub, allow me to qualify what Wakili has talked about in one sentence. And I really hope that this broadcast will be on YouTube after we are done with this.
Of course.
Wakili has highlighted something that, as a student of history, I've always taken note of, right from, we say all problems begin in childhood, right from the formation of the country, the republic, the state. I was fortunate in 2012, while working as a special advisor to the then vice president, to travel on an Air Force jet and work, and for the first time go to Wajir.
That's my home county.
That's your home county?
That's my home county. And born, bred, brought up.
And when we arrived there, we found during the signing of the visitor's book that the president had also come around there a few months before. And as you know, I'm very observant. And I really wondered, once we landed at
that's the airstrip, the military airstrip.
The military airstrip. Were received warmly. You know, Kenyans usually are just warm. And I really wondered how, just after leaving the airstrip, all the roads in the downtown area of Wajir were changarawe, sand roads. And I wondered, how come there's no tarmac in this place where there are Kenyans? And I didn't get any answers, because you can be sure I vocalized my thoughts a little bit. And why I wanted to explain this is because if you look at the formation of a country, I always tell my counterparts that you must resist the temptation to do evil. If you talk about locking out areas, think about locking out areas in your home from distribution. That you have 5 kids and then you lock out some of them and say, some of them, I will not pay their school fees, I'll not visit them, I'll not talk to them. You know, these are temptations around the forces of evil. If you say, I have a rogue minister, you know, Pio Gama Pinto and what have you, so I'm tempted to murder him, political assassinations and what have you. Or here is a resource meant for the people, but we're going to divert this resource.
Okay.
And Wakili and I, who is my AG, we are going to, Attorney General, we're going to buy apartments in London. I think the African fell victim to lack of introspection right from the beginning, where we fell into the yielding into the temptation to do evil, and the doing of that evil, Ayub then cascaded into a culture.
All right.
Where up to today, you get elected governor, and the first thing you do is divert funds into your wife's
private
account.
accounts.
Exactly.
Okay, and to just point out this.
So I just want to caution that
right.
you must.
That's clear. An agreement is a paper here, which is scholarly from one of the universities locally in the country that notes the thinking around sessional paper 10 in terms of the equity and development suffered bad leadership and poor governance in implementation right from when the paper was mooted. It continued, this has had a contagion effect on all the other sessional papers in ways that have been systematic. Governance institutions and state-owned enterprises have suffered, leading to poor service delivery, stunted development outcomes, and unequal.
But what's the saddest part about that paper?
Kenya.
Does anyone here know the saddest part about that paper?
This or the sessional paper 10 of
The sessional paper 10
1965.
of 1965. The saddest part about it is that this is the paper that Singapore used to set up their institutions and their structures.
And when the Kenyan delegation went
They
there, they
got
were
it
told
right.
that we used your own paper in terms of setting ourselves up. Brian, Benjamin, and Ben and Kennedy, let's see the break on the broadcast. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to the Mulembe Nation, where there are concerns as regards yesterday's pressure issued by the Bungoma Senator Moses Wetangula, who blamed or placed the heap of blame on Raila Odinga alongside Musalia Mudavadi, the ANC party leader. We'll make sense of that with Benjamin of course, and Brian alongside Echesa, who hails from that part of the country. The number is 0791478990, the hashtag on Twitter, NewDayKE, the short SMS code is 40920. We are back after the break on the broadcast. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Good afternoon, and we are into the second segment of the broadcast. Now, a section of Western leaders led by ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi and his Fort Kenya counterpart Moses Masika Wetangula have announced to teach a political lesson the ODM party leader Raila Odinga for meddling with the Mulembe Nation political affairs. In a meeting held yesterday in Wetangula's residence here in Nairobi County, the leaders, accompanied by more than 25 elected members of parliament, said they will not allow outsiders led by Mr. Odinga and Kotu boss Francis Atwoli to finance few individuals to divide the Western Kenya political vote. Here is our political affairs reporter Jeff Chaimba with the details of that story.
Days after the Kotu boss Francis Atwoli rallied behind about 20 members of parliament in advocating for the Luhya unity, Mulembe leaders who claim to be the men of the soil, led by the ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula of Fort Kenya, hate back castigating Francis Atwoli and the ODM leader Raila Odinga of regrouping to wreak havoc Western unity.
Unfortunately, we have seen people arrogating themselves powers and authority they don't have, of even wanting to give people measures as to how much oxygen they can inhale. This will not do.
So we must, as a nation, move away from being cocooned or being put into some corner of loyalty pledges.
Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula will lead a delegation of more than 25 members of parliament at Wetangula's current home, announced to cement the Luhya unity ahead of the 2022 polls as political realignments continues to take shape.
And we have very many of those in Kenya who have been scratched, and they tell us to go to the wall to rub ourselves.
So let us not push things down their throat. And that is why we stand here in solidarity, to say, let institutions function, let political parties function.
There has been politics of betrayal in this land, but the real and the worst betrayal is when you lose your identity. We have rejected that our peace and unity will never be procured again in a neighbor's house. Thank you.
The statement by Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula comes a day after a group of the members of parliament and Bungoma Governor Wycliffe Wangamati staged a coup against Moses Wetangula by ousting from the Ford Kenya party as the party leader. According to them, Raila, Odinga and Francis Atwoli are to blame over the political wrangles in the region.
When a friend wants to finish you, he will start by removing the children from your home. Then he will follow by your wife. And then he will end up finishing you because you will have nobody to defend you. I know we will stand strong because the same formula someone is using. He has also attempted to remove the children of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya by getting the people who have supported him all along, including myself, Honorable Benjamin Jomo Washali, who stood with Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta in Western region. There's someone who is now his friend has proposed to him to get rid of me, who has been a very loyal son of Uhuru Kenyatta.
Odinga has turned things upside down in our house and expected that the owners of the home will not call him to order. 8. We have now come to a point where hand-picked henchmen now presume that they can rise themselves up to be our leaders and to speak for us. Together with their principles, they have hatched a sinister agendas to wreak havoc in our political parties, to disorganize us.
In the earlier meeting held at Atwoli's residence in Kajiado County, the leaders resolved to install Francis Atwoli, devolution CS Eugene Wamalwa, and the Kakamega Governor Wycliffe Oparanya as their community spokesman. But in a quick rejoinder, Musalia Mudavadi-led bandwagon have vowed to denounce the trio.
For avoidance of doubt, our leaders in Western Kenya are Honorable Musalia Mudavadi and Honorable Moses Wetangula. That Francis Atwoli, Wycliffe Oparanya, and Eugene Wamalwa cannot speak for the Luhya people.
The boat has taken off, and we are in one voice, and speaking one voice. We want to move into Kenya.
By now, the leaders have resolved to hit the ground running in the Western region and sound a clear warning to the members of the parliament who attended the Atwoli and the Raila Odinga meeting of meddling with the regional political affairs. Reporting for Ebro TV, I'm Jeff Khaemba.
Thank you, Jeff, for that update. It's in regards to Mulembe Nation, its political future going forward, and the blame now heaped on the ODM party leader Raila Odinga. The Daily Nation, in its cartoon page, covered it this way, and here is what we have. Moses Wetangula apparently confused between who to blame, between the ODM party leader Raila Odinga, Cotu boss Francis Atwoli, and CS devolution Eugene Wamalwa. Ken Echesa, if I may come to you on this, I mean, it will take, isn't it, perhaps a zeal, energy, and a political clout to a higher level extent to loosen Raila Odinga's grip on Western Kenya politics?
That is correct. And Ayub, I want to tell you for free that Raila Odinga does not require the support or influence of anyone to come to Western Kenya and to convince voters. Raila Odinga has a huge following in Western Kenya as opposed to any other candidate other than the late Kijana Michael Wamalwa, who made a stab at the presidency and consolidated the Luhya vote. I'll give you the county analysis. Look at Busia County. Busia County has been an orange zone since 2007. In fact, half of the Luhyas in Busia County speak the Luo. They identify with Odinga. Come to Kakamega County. When you look at the neighboring constituencies of Butere, Huisero, Mumias East, Mumias West, they are Luo dominated. And then that bonding makes Odinga their favorite candidate. Go to Vihiga County, where Musalia comes from. The two constituencies of Luanda and Muhaya, they border Maseno, which is technically in Luo Nyanza.
Okay.
The Luo influence and the Odinga influence is very high. Then go to Bungoma. That is where Odinga has had a problem. He has never been accepted in Bungoma because he left Ford Kenya at a time when Michael Wamalwa needed him more. And that is why he's coming through Kina Wetangula, Kina Eugene, Kina Ken Lusaka. Odinga today, if elections was to be held today between Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi, I have no doubt that Odinga will defeat Mudavadi in broad daylight. In 2013, Mudavadi was a candidate But Odinga defeated him, including in his own Sabatia constituency.
And in Western Kenya largely.
In Western
So
Kenya
what will it take then perhaps then to, I mean, to end Odinga's sort of control politically in Western Kenya?
I think as learned as I may be, I still believe to an extent in political superstition. And I go to the philosophy of Elijah Masinde Wanameme, who said that before leadership can get to Western Kenya, it will go through the lake. And people have interpreted to mean that before a leader can emerge from Western Kenya, then Raila Odinga or any other Luo leader would have led. And that is what our elders will tell us. That's what the masses will tell us. That you see, our seer, our prophet said this. The only way to consolidate Western Kenya under one man is to have Raila Odinga out of political equation.
Okay, Benji.
I'm of the contrary opinion.
Okay.
And I studied this very carefully. Wakil is right. Raila has been extremely influential, very popular in Western. In fact, he has asserted publicly that he is actually Luya. That he is Luo, Raila, mwana wa Odinga, Odinga mwana wa Oginga, Oginga mwana wa Wenwa mwana wa
Sakwa. Sakwa mwana wa Wanga.
Sakwa mwana wa Wanga.
Now which takes us to Kakamega.
So when they say Waluya, mimi wapi hapo. So this is part of his political game plan, and in a sense it has worked. Why I feel that influence has to be waning on a downward trend now, Ayub, is because, as Wakili has rightly said, in 2013, the people of Western snapped their own son
to vote for Odinga.
Because, and I like Western politics because it is more ideological rather than purely tribal, because they were in ODM, Chungwa Chama Mabadiliko ya Kweli. I have had these discussions because I was in the game. That's part of my job. The problem for Raila especially lies in two areas. Geographically. Western, which has sacrificed a lot against everything to support him, and coast. And those two areas, in essence, I'm sorry to say, have gotten nothing. For all their support, all these years, time and time again, the only thing now they have reaped is their own sons' internecine wars, fighting, and Raila's name and image hovering large behind all of these fighting. And so they say that doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result, is insanity.
Okay, do you mean a shift by Western Kenya to vote elsewhere, to vote for another candidate?
Western Kenya, there's something that Atwoli tried to do that was, in my opinion, magnificent. And sadly, unfortunately, it is once again Honorable Raila who soiled it. Because Atwoli put a lot of resources to mobilize the entire Western Kenya under an expanded coalition, which already the Code Coalition was a big coalition. And now once they brought in Mudavadi under the National Super Alliance, it was unassailable. But then the entire thing collapsed because Raila insisted on going forward. So there's a lot of baggage. These leaders are not just, they understand the popularity of Raila and the seniority of Raila. Might I underscore something I like to underscore when I'm doing my political analysis?
Okay.
That the leadership on the NASA coalition are the political seniors of His Excellency the President and the Deputy President.
All right.
So it is not by accident that they are actually having the courage to point fingers at Raila and call his name in actual fact. It is because they feel they have nothing to lose.
Okay, then Brian, when you look at all these developments in regards to the political future of the Mulemba nation, I mean, Musalia Mudavadi defeated in his own political backyard by Raila Odinga in 2013. It will take a lot, isn't it, in terms of his investment politically that he has to ensure that Raila Odinga's grip is loosened in Western Kenya?
First of all, I want to agree with my brother Ken Wakili that the support that Raila Odinga has got in Western Kenya is something that Mudavadi Wetangula cannot claim that they are going to teach him a lesson moving forward. And let me just tell you this. What is happening in Ford Kenya, what has made Wetangula and Mudavadi to come and say that now they want to teach Raila a lesson is something that we should not even be talking about. In fact, let me tell you, whatever happened to Wetangula was a machination of the people, the members of Ford Kenya, members of his party, who felt that he's not leading them in the right direction. He has failed to show leadership to his party. And that is normal. When people no longer trust your leadership, when people believe that you're not taking them to the right direction, it is within their mandate to take decisions such that they remove you. And that is what happened to Wetangula through Ford Kenya. Now, this is common. If, for example, if I'm a member of Third Way Alliance Kenya, if we feel as members of Third Way Alliance Kenya that Dr. Ikuru Aukot is not offering the right leadership we need, we will do exactly the same thing the people of Ford Kenya did to Wetangula. And that can happen to Uhuru, that can happen to Raila. If the people of ODM, the members of ODM feels that Raila is not leading them well, they will remove him. So instead of putting all their anger in Raila and saying the way the Raila is behind everything, I think they just need to confront the real issues, that people are tired, they have not offered leadership, people have trusted them, and therefore they need to address that issue. But to come back to whether Raila is losing grip in the Mulembe Nation or not, let me tell you, Bwana Echesa has explained very well the analysis of the Luya politics, right from Trans Nzoia to Bungoma to Vihiga to Kakamega and even to Busia. And I can tell you, Raila, for the last 10 years, Raila has been controlling 70 to 80% of the Luya votes, with or without Mudavadi or Wetangula, from 2007, 2013, and to the last election. So I don't think Wetangula and Mudavadi, and by the way, the only advice, if there are people who can listen to advice, the only thing they can do right now, the two gentlemen from Mulembe Nation, is to join the initiative that is being pushed by the president and the prime minister, or else they'll vanquish politically.
Okay.
I can assure you. Look at the people who are associating themselves with the Raila Odinga team right now. From Bungoma, from Trans Nzoia, for example, you have CS Eugene Wamalwa, who is speaking for both Bukusu and Bungoma. If you come to Tiriki, you saw Haniri at Wally's place. If you come to Busia, he doesn't need anybody there. Busia is his home turf. If you come to Kakamega, Governor Wycliffe Oparanya has established a very serious political clout in Kakamega, and that is Raila's deputy. If you come to Vihiga, as he told you, in Emuhaya, in Luanda, serious influx of Luo population there. So really, even in Mudavadi's backyard, I am very sure, as Wakili said, if we conduct an election today by 9 a.m., Mudavadi will be home and Raila will be in.
Okay. And to sum it all, what my brother has said, I want to address my brother Wycliffe Musalia Mudavadi. His best chances of ruling this country, whether in 2022, 2042 or 2050, is working under the political pupillage of the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. If he moves away from Raila Odinga, just like in 2002, my brother from Lulu will be vanquished politically. Ford Kenya is now gone. It is under Wafula Wamunyinyi. And what Kenyans must know, that Ford Kenya under Wafula Wamunyinyi is going to bring back Echesa Kitui, bring back Musikari Kombo, bring back Eugene Wamalwa. It is a force that will replace Wetangula. ANC is going. David President of ANC is Ayub Savula. You saw him at Atwali's place. Yeah. Just wait for a few days, you will hear a coup in ANC.
Okay, then in terms of all these changes, let's be a bit philosophical, Wakili, before we go to Benji. What do you think is perhaps the catalyst that's driving all these changes? For instance, the Ford Kenya changes, or the political coup happened after the Friday meeting in Kajiado, the home turf of the Kotu Sekjan Francis Atwoli, and then you hinted at possibly in the foreseeable future a similar scenario that's likely going to be affected at the ANC level. I mean, are all these changes perhaps in line with what we're seeing as the broad bracket of the handshake in which Odinga and Atwoli are the catalysts?
Truth be told, these coups are state-funded for the reason that the Western Bloc is very fragile. If you leave the Western Bloc, it can decide, as my brother has said, to go anywhere. That is the most objective bloc. So there are several attempts by different quarters to wipe this particular bloc into one direction. If you leave Musalia to be strong, leave Wetangula to be strong, they may decide to work with William Ruto to the disadvantage of the state-sponsored candidates. So what is going on is cleansing, and anybody associated with William Ruto in Western Kenya, the state and the Prime Minister and Atwoli have decided to do away with him.
Okay. Benji, then, when you look at, for instance, the removal from the position of the Deputy Minority Whip of Ford Kenya, member, that is Dr. Chris Omalwa. And you look at Cecily Mbarere now out, you look at Benjamin Oshale out, and you look at Susan Kihika out, the former majority leader of the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen out. All this because they have been supporting the Deputy President, William Ruto. Is he the force that the other end of the political divide is fighting to create a political coalition going forward to 2022?
I sent a tweet out yesterday, and in that tweet I explained that William Ruto is under siege, yes, but I am a big believer in the cause and effect theory. It did not just happen that William Ruto is under siege. William Ruto brought this upon himself. I have never seen a human being moving at 500 kilometers per hour. William Ruto, for all intents and purposes, sorry to be so blunt on air, ran the government in the president's first term. And his tentacles were anywhere and everywhere. If you look at even at clips of the campaigns and of everything that happened up to the nullification and beyond, the level of finesse when it comes to mobilization, when it comes to name calling, when it comes to mchongoano, where literally you are bringing crowds and belittling leaders as if they were primary school kids. To where kids are even, I remember one time I called one of my workers, and the DP was in Mombasa. And I called one of my workers and I could hear so much chaos, and he told me, "Ebu nikupigie boss, tunasikiza hapa DP." Because he knows how to deal on the issues. And the way that he was moving, even with these harambes, which Raila questioned, then they were in the media. I mean, you can go to a place and give a donation of 18 million Kenya shillings in cash, in a church, and women are literally screaming, women of Women's Guild. William Ruto brought all this upon himself. Because obviously someone will take a step back and say, wait a minute, this guy is dangerous. What if he's to become president? And so there are some powers that be that took a look and said, wait a minute, if this guy
becomes the head of state,
we're going to have a problem. So I'm explaining how they thought. And by the way, if it was not for this BBI thing, those who have studied William and know him, William who is a teetotaler, William who is in the office by 5 a.m., William who will open something in Makadara, then you see him in Trans Nzoia in the same day, then in the evening, then you hear he has crossed into Sudan, the same William, he would have just become president after a 10-minute exercise. And so that's why you see the real daggers. You can see how Atwoli and Murathe, when they speak, you can see they're almost going crazy. It's a fact. They say we can't, he shouldn't even be on the ballot. And so anyone then aligned to him, we've seen severally. I mean, there was a press conference when Moses Kuria was talking about Kumwaga Kitoweo, where they did the numbers of the MPs allied to the deputy president.
That was in parliament.
Personally, I feel that his approach was wrong. And I've told them both privately and publicly. I feel that he could have, the seat was his anyway. But the over-aggression, especially against the backdrop of the president saying, Ayub, this is my last term. Jameni is idea.
Let's work on the pledges made.
Let's work on this together. Because that's apparently what happened in the first PG from 2017. But then, so you agree on that, and then the next weekend, you see someone doing a harambe in Maralal. Then, you know, Ruto will go even to Kisumu and do a harambe. So that does not advance the president's agenda.
Is that perhaps the cause of all this whipping that we're seeing in terms of his allies being plucked out of plum committee positions in parliament, for instance?
It is. And if you look even at his output once again, even in terms of campaign, and even when it came to threatening judges, the footage is all there on YouTube. What did he say?
That was after the nullification.
Yeah, he said, the judges, you have had your say. We will also have our day.
That was September 2017.
I mean, you joke with a man like that?
Okay, I mean, all this then is perhaps a prophecy of how the Ruto presidency will look like. That's what David Murathe is concerned about. And
totalitarian.
And during the Meru BBI
Where Oscar
summit,
Sudi is Minister for Justice, Rashid Echesa Minister for Education.
Your cousin.
Okay.
My cousin.
then in terms of the political plan that they had, In somewhat, does it perhaps look like then the president reaching out to Raila Odinga perhaps is because of the insecurities created by DP William Ruto for his boss?
By the way, I challenge our audience. Go and look at the footage where William Ruto attacks savagely and at length. You know, it's one thing to just throw a comment. It's another to attack at length during the burial of Makto, where he attacks Gideon. First of all, in vernacular, the president is seated there. It goes on and on and on and on. And once again, I just reiterate, William Ruto has something to worry about, yes. You know why? Because he's made all these enemies. He is the one who made them. If you look at how he even fights with Raila, you cannot even believe Raila was his boss. I mean, he does not pull any punches. And in fact, one of the best ways, Ayub, to view the deputy president is to view him in the prism of, excuse me, of his predecessor. Just put them on a scale and weigh the character and the courage between Honorable Kalonzo and Honorable William Ruto. Hey, my friend.
Okay, totally two different personalities, political character, and of course in terms of their approach to things and the
when
language.
You can say in public, unajua ule mzee alidanganya, mtu alikuwa vice president limwacha ameketi kwa lami. You know, people are just screaming. This country really have been through a lot.
Yes, Brian, is it the cause of perhaps a self-infliction damage for the DP William Ruto, and are there lessons that he could archive from the former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi in terms of
humility?
Humility, I mean, going down for his boss, ensuring that his loyalty is not questionable, is not questioned. At some point, Kenyatta did ask the then Attorney General, and the first for that matter, Charles Nyonjo, on whether Moi was loyal to him. He said he was loyal to you than I do. That was Charles Nyonjo speaking to Kenyatta.
Wow, this is so interesting. But I think, as Benji has said, the deputy president had a very good opportunity to take over the leadership of this country after next year. He had a very good, and everybody believed, by the way, that he was going to take over. But based on his utterances, based on his the way he has performed and his actions, actually it is very clear right now that these are just slipped off him. It is very unfortunate. He's somebody who has worked. He has supported the president to be where he is. He has done a lot, and everybody can see that. But this has just slipped off him, and unfortunately he's not going to get it, because with the changes that are happening right now, with the conversation that are going on right now, it will be very, I think the deal is sealed, and unfortunately, the deputy president is a casualty in this.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yes, well, Wakil Echesa, when his allies are plucked out of plum positions at the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen, Susan Kihika Kimani, whose father apparently opposed Moi's ascendancy to the presidency in 1978, if it were not for Njonjo. And you look at now Benjamin Oshali gone, and Cecily Mbarire. Is this perhaps the preparation model, the plowing of the ground for DP William Ruto, in this case, the parliamentary system of governance, and totally taking the political vehicle from the 2022 presidential election to a shift to a parliamentary system of governance and an expanded executive at the top?
Absolutely. And in literature, what William Ruto is going through is what we will term as deserved misfortune, that you are suffering, but that suffering is deserved, and your audience cannot shed a tear for you. Our eyes refuse to rain for one William Ruto. This is something that he has, this is self-inflicted pain. And William Ruto is a victim of ambition. His major source of problem is his ambition. And in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, a character, because of being very ambitious, killed his own father unknowingly and married his own mother unknowingly and sired 2 children.
That's because of ambition?
Because of ambition.
Okay.
And challenging people to duels, challenging the gods. William Ruto's best recourse would have been in humility. President Moi suffered in humility, and that is why he was rewarded with a big seat. William Ruto's politics, as Benji said, characterized by arrogance, chest thumping, names calling, and his trotting locally without a clear agenda. And when you are everywhere at every time, you become an easier target for your enemies. And people fear William Ruto more than they even anticipate to go into power themselves.
By the way, Ayub, let me connect for you how.
Is that why Murad and company are all out, all guns blazing?
Let me connect
Briefly,
for you.
as we do so as we finish up.
Let me connect for you as an artist how dynamic politics is. There is a time, just a few years ago, that William Ruto tore into Moses Wetangula in the most savage fashion.
That was when he mentioned his family issues.
On his family issues. Where he said, how can you even undergo that by your wife and you even run to a police station? Si hata ungejificha and you say, at least see watu wengi waliona. And you know, he's telling this to Mwananchi, to the guard, to the Mama Mboga, etc.
Which is more or less a figurative
so
language.
It's very impactful, yes. So when you do stuff like this, let me explain my point. When you cap, it's called capping, C-A-R-P. When you cap a leader that way, what William Ruto did is actually he exposed Wetangula as not that tough a man, as a matter of fact, and someone who is, remember, under siege with corruption allegations about what happened in the Japan Tokyo embassy scandal and what have you, so that the guys that are with Wetangula in the party actually had just one meeting and realized we can actually take this bugger out. So this is very damaging. When you hear people in politics talk about always respect the party leader, respect, do this, avoid the name calling, etc. Even a lot of the things Raila was saying during the campaign in 2017 were very hurtful to the president. Yeah, I cannot repeat them here. And you're saying this in Tononoka where the crowd is almost 1 million people. And where there are elements of truth in what you're saying. And so this once again explains the fear. And lastly, as I wrap up, one of the biggest mistakes he's done as well is, so you're a very coarse and tough, indefatigable, relentless fellow who can't back down. You know, William Ruto cannot back down from a fight. If you told him there's a fight coming on Thursday, then he'll wake up and shower and go there and wait for you. He cannot. But, I mean, look at even the things you're accused of in the cases. So when you're such a character, then you add into the mix Murkomen,
Susan Kihika,
Moses Kuria. What do you have?
Dindi Nyoro.
What do you, I mean, this becomes like almost a terrorist organization, I'm sorry to say. And so this will just increase the fear as well as the resistance. Look at Alice Wahome. How can you believe she's 70 years old? Alice Wahome, and she's not a police officer. She arrested a poll clerk,
returning officer,
and assaulted him on air. These are the people we're talking about.
Okay.
She's not shy about it.
Not to forget what Benjamin Mkapa
and formatted him. A 70-year-old woman.
The former Tanzanian president did say in his memoir, The Life of a President, that William Ruto and Martha Karua were the radical ends of the Grand Coalition government representatives.
I need to read that book.
Yes, a very good book that Benjamin Mkapa reflects on his years.
And thanks for having us, Ayub.
Okay, thank you. Brian,
it's actually hot in the studio.
Brian, let me give you the final comments alongside Ken will be finishing up. In regards to what David Morada did say, is it because they are now the tiny proportion that represent the large majority, as Morada does always say, that they have a problem with the Ruto presidency in terms of its integrity, in terms of its policies, in terms of his approach, and what they say is an authoritarian presidency under his rule?
Well, I think Murade and team have realized that the presidency under the Deputy President William Ruto will be very tough, not just for them, but for the entire country, because they have seen his actions, they have seen the way he has risen into power, they have seen the wealth he has accumulated, allegedly accumulated over this particular period of time. And so there are many questions that are lingering among Kenyans' minds, and they are very worried about his presidency. So what is happening is something that is a great concern, and what I can say is that the Deputy President has reached a point that he should just sit back and reflect and see whether he can be able to join the initiative that his boss is leading, together with the Prime Minister, as hard as it is, or wait for his end in 2022. It is so unfortunate, as I said earlier, but that is the reality. Yeah, but generally I also think that the President and the government need to do something about the current economy and to reopen the economy, because Kenyans are suffering and it appears that we are going to have a new normal. And so this must be addressed seriously so that we can get back to business and move forward as a nation.
Okay. Yes,
thank you very much.
Yes, okay, Echesa.
Thank you, Aib, first for having me here today. My closing remarks are as follows. William Samoei Ruto has failed to inspire the passion and confidence of the elites and the capitalists in this country that under his presidency, Kenya will be safe, and that class of capitalists, the class of wealth owners, the likes of Murathe, will be safe. He has identified with the hustler nation, not knowing that the hustler nation has no political stand whatsoever. The hustler nation is controlled remotely from other quarters. To President Kenyatta, the purge continues. As you carry out the purge, may you now strengthen institutions. Let parliament work, let the judiciary work, let the executive deliver on the government promises.
Wakili Kennedy Echesa, lecturer of law at the University of Nairobi. Good afternoon. Thank you for making time. Benjamin Dolo, worth continuing with this discussion. Very extensive, very lengthy.
Senior political analyst.
Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
SNR political commentator.
Correct.
And Brian Omondi is a party member of the Third Way Alliance Party of Kenya. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. So let's take a look at the highlights across the international scene in regard to what's transpiring in the United States of America. Here's what's coming up, the mapping aspect of the states across the United States that have been affected or impacted by the ongoing unrest in regard to the death of George Floyd in police custody on the 25th of May 2020. More than 20 so far affected, including California, Washington, Texas, South Dakota and Carolina, Massachusetts, and the other states that make up the United States of America as shaded in the orange. If we move on the right side of the other stories that are making up the international headlines, Donald Trump threatens military force as protests intensify. These are live updates from Al Jazeera News, and there are concerns as to the unrest and the impact they have had on the economy in the states in the United States of America. And he warned governors if they can't take stern action, then he won't hesitate in the deployment of the military. A controversial tweet, of course, which was flagged by Twitter. He said that when the looting starts, the shootings will start equally. Now, going forward, the other story is covered by the BBC. This is in regard to the CNN, rather. This is in regard to also what's transpiring. Fire that continues to be witnessed across states in the United States of America. Donald Trump's warning from the White House, and the curfew in Washington, D.C., and equally the looting of stores and shops across many states in New York, and including New York and the United States of America, and in Washington, D.C. We finish up with the BBC coverage of that, and George Floyd death. Trump now threatens to send in the army to quell or end the unrest, and a picture of the president yesterday when he addressed the presser in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. We come to a close on the broadcast. Of course, final brief comments in regards to George Floyd.
Sorry that we kind of oversaw this. From this desk at Ebru TV, we certainly wish, and we have continued to do this on social media, to identify with the struggles of all the blacks in the United States, where I spent a large chunk of my life. We feel very pained. I have a lot of friends on the streets as we speak. We call for normalcy, for human rights defense, for a stoppage to human rights abuses. And from this desk at Ebru, we stand with the George Floyd family. We are in solidarity.
Okay.
We pass our deepest condolences and make it clear that police brutality and this kind of snuffing out of human life is not only an embarrassment for a superpower like the United States, but it is so 17th century. It must stop. We got busy on our political situation here locally, but we very much pass our solidarity and condolences to the family and community of George Floyd, and all those other black folks, especially affected by this.
Okay, Brian, Benji, and Ken Echesa, thank you so much for making time again. I appreciate your time. We'll see you next Tuesday by the grace of God. And Diana Rachel Mbugwa is up next with the 1 p.m. news in about 10 minutes' time. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Good afternoon.